Hello again everyone, welcome to our review for the PhysiX. Have a few new things going on here, a new layout and additional center that I filmed at. The new layout is 75 by 4 3/4 by 55 for the dual angle crowd, 4 3/4 by 5.5 by 3.5 for the pin buffer crowd. For me it puts the pin in the ring finger and almost stacks the CG and PSA beneath it. It gives me a bit more length down the lane, a bit slower read on the back, and a nice compromise on the pin distance. My usual 5 1/4 pin was just a bit flatter on the back than I'd like. So a bit of a change here too. I got a chance to bowl on arguably the worst lane in the house. It's notorious for playing wetter and being really slow and wiggly on the back end, and it's not a fresh shot either. Most videos show nice fresh conditions, but rarely do you see any garbage time. I had the opportunity and I took it because if it looked good on this lane in this condition, especially being a nano hybrid ASIM, that was going to give me a ton more information than I usually get. As you've already seen, it looks pretty bulletproof for me even on this condition. I'm going to start mixing in more misses in the middle of the strikes, a la what Tamer did on his video. It just gives a better overall representation of what's going on. However, I didn't have a ton of misses to show. Even on this beat up condition, I had to throw it really bad to miss. You'll see later at the other center too, but I got on a couple of 8 or 9 strike runs at both places, and considering that this one here is the worst lane in the center and it's already been bowled on, I was pretty impressed. The best word I came up with to describe this ball was comfortable. I think I can stop talking about how easy stuff gets through the heads. That's what reactives are designed to do, is get down the lane and hook. And it does that, but what I notice is that I never had to force anything or make physical adjustments based on a facet of the reaction. I didn't have to throw it to get it down the lane, but I didn't have to hammer on it at the bottom to get it to read either. I didn't have to wrap around it to get it to shape or finish. It was just nice and relaxed. I just had to execute a good shot, and it did all the right things in the right places. It revved in the mid lane without chugging or grinding to a halt, and it's firm and rolly on the back end. That's a pretty typical nano reaction for me. If it's nano, I always match up with it well, but this might be about the best it's been. Being a hybrid cover, it's not as chewy in the mid lane as, say, the Idol or the Halo, which really dig in deep. The PhysiX goes an extra several feet before it starts to move, and even though the sanded cover will transition the lanes, the ball reaction does mask some of that transition because it's not super sensitive to friction. If you build it, it will hook, but I used it in League last night and only had to move 2 boards all night because what happened is that my reaction got a little earlier, but it also blended the back end transition as well. So in terms of front to back, I did see a shape difference as it got earlier throughout the night, but not much happened right to left. As we compare it to the Sherlock, the Codex, and the Intense Fire, you can see that it shares the most in common with the Codex. The Sherlock is much stronger. The Codex shapes similar, but is 2 to 3 boards weaker, and the Intense Fire is kind of like a longer and stronger version that's about 4 to 5 boards weaker. Full comparison videos with each of these balls will be coming out between now and release day, which is October 19th, so be sure to watch for those. Moving to Angel, you can see that we get a pretty similar look. It was strong enough to push her further left than she usually gets, but that's a combination of the cover strength and the surface. I think once it gets a little shine, it will settle in a bit for her, but this type of motion fits her very well. It looks like a longer and stronger version of her Idol, which of course makes sense because of the nano factor. Sometimes she gets it off her hand so clean that it's hard for me to get a good read on what the ball will do for other people, but it also makes stuff really versatile for her. She lets the ball do the work so I can get a really clean look at just the ball itself. Much easier down the lane for her than me for obvious reasons, but it does get through the mid lane easier than the information would suggest. With this new atomic core, it's got an RG of 2.48, which is very low. The differential's 0.53. So it's a pretty strong and rolly core to begin with before you even add in a sanded nano hybrid. So to me, this is trademark Storm hybrid reaction too. I mean, we've got the best hybrids on the market by a long shot. Our hybrids are so silky down the lane and blend friction so well without losing energy, which is probably why the High Road's been around 10 years and you're seeing the Intense Fire everywhere now, but the PhysiX is another impressive entry. Now for the new center, which is Gage Center, recently acquired by the same owners of my home center. This is a fresh shot, and they've got just a couple-year-old Pro Lane in there, so nice new surface. Right away you can tell I've got a few more boards right than usual, plus the back-end reaction is stronger in the middle of the lane, so this equates to a lot more room than I have at the other center. Generally, reaction at the other center is stronger and smoother. Here I'm able to wheel on it a bit better and more successfully play more areas or zones on the lane. Also, I think at this center I'll see a lot more similar reaction to what Tamer sees. Tamer Bowling and I have a lot of the same viewers and will often get different looks or different reads on a ball, but I think that's due more to the difference in lane surface and topography. I've been asked to use sport patterns before, but in my opinion, lane surface and topography are more dominant factors. I've actually used sport patterns a couple times in videos before, the snap lock and the rocket ship a couple years ago to be specific, but rarely do I get forced out of the same zone that I normally play unless the conditions are so different to the point that the ball reaction wouldn't be too relevant or helpful. So to be quite honest, I had intended to play around more on the lane here, but I got so locked in where I was at that I got distracted. As the back ends are more crisp here, the usual transition results in some flat hits or just a touch later reaction that causes ring 10s long before you'll have early reaction or track burn. Once again, as I mentioned above, the reaction got earlier but also a bit smoother too, so the transition at both centers with the PhysiX seemed to be more front to back than side to side. I threw a 9-bagger before wrapping a 10 to finish up filming here. Final verdict is that it's really hard to keep this ball out of the pocket once you get lined up, and the transition affects the ball so subtly that unless you make a really terrible shot, you're gonna get a warning to move in the form of a corner pin or a 4 or a 6, depending on which side of the lane you bowl on. I also found that the misses the ball covers up the best are misses to the right and being a little slow. A bit left and it'll pick up and move, a bit firm and it can go a touch long. This was consistent for both of us, and really the only group I can see this ball not being good to great for are the high speed and low rev crowd. You'd probably be better off picking up a Sherlock. Obviously the low speed, high rev crowd is going to need a lot of oil, but given those conditions, it's still going to play. The PhysiX releases on October 19th. I think you should take a good hard look at this one. For extra premium content, early access, behind-the-scenes looks, private Q&As, blogs, and more, join a passionate new type of bowling community at www.patreon.com/Luke Rosdahl.